The Seattle Kraken lose another time to the St. Louis Blues somehow. We're going to talk about that. Also, more of the great interview with Geoff Baker coming up on Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Zaiem alongside Glenn Dreyfuss, and we are with Davy Jones Locker Room, where we cover the Seattle Torrent and Seattle Kraken. And welcome to Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Last night, Glenn, the Kraken were coming off of their big win against Carolina. They're going for their franchise record, 6th home win in a row. It's against the Reeling Blues. Yeah, they lost to them a couple of games ago in St. Louis, but this time the Kraken have regrouped after the Olympic break. They got their game back. The Blues aren't good. The Kraken are good. They score in the first 31 seconds. The Kraken are rolling. They have the first 5 shots on goal. It's going to be easy. And then everybody fell asleep.
Zaiem, I hope you're wearing something flame retardant, because here we go.
All right.
The one word to describe the Seattle Kraken since the Olympic break: henhouse, because in 3 of their 5 games post-break, they've laid an egg. Not just losses, listless losses. This game had a fragrance, an aroma, if you will, and it wasn't fresh lilac or mountain pine. The only saving grace was that unless you were at Climate Pledge Arena or had an ESPN Plus subscription, you didn't see it. And Kraken fans didn't shower themselves in glory either, judging by the wide swaths of empty seats for a team that had won its last 5 home games. Let's not kid ourselves about the quality of the opposition. The St. Louis Blues are in disarray. Only the Rangers and the Canucks have fewer points in the entire league. Their goal differential is minus 51. 4 of their star players have been the subject of trade rumors. And the Kraken don't even have the excuse that the Blues snuck up on them. One of those Kraken eggs was laid 1 week ago in St. Louis, a 5-1 loss. So this should have been a payback game for Seattle, if nothing else. The Blues give up an average of 3.4 goals per game. The Kraken didn't manage that many in their last 2 games combined versus that team. I've got more to say, but I'm going to try to cool off, and then I'll hit you with some more.
Somebody on Twitter mentioned that they felt like they didn't want to do anything after a very rainy day, after a string of sunny days. And that immediately makes sense. I'm going to brag for a second here. So I used to go to parties, and I used to go to, yeah, I know. And we would have it was like a once a month party, the first Tuesday of the month or whatever it was. And I did this for years. If it was a sunny day, attendance was great. If it was a cloudy day, attendance would be less. If it was a rainy day after a series of sunny days, you might as well just cancel it. Nobody wants to leave the house. Nobody wants to go anywhere. For me personally, I love going to home games, but yesterday with the rain, and it's like, oh man, I don't want to get dressed and go in traffic and then go. And even though I love going to Kraken games, even if the team is not playing well, it's just a great experience. I do think that maps to what I know about Seattle crowds and the way I feel and the way everyone responds to the weather. It makes sense that everyone was feeling a little down, a little low energy. A lot of people didn't want to leave the house, and that would be independent of what is happening on the ice or the team quality. So I don't usually blame the weather for things that happen in hockey. But this time, I'm going to blame the weather.
And maybe the Kraken had seasonal affective disorder. I don't know. Because on Wednesday, unless you were a former Blue like Jaden Schwartz or Vince Dunn, the number of goals scored by the rest of the team was 0. I want to quote a line from our guest in the next segment, Geoff Baker's game story on the Kraken's own website. And this is why I say Geoff hasn't lost a mile off his fastball. Quote, the home team's skating and pressure seemed to vanish for a prolonged swath of time. Now, if you think Geoff and I am being overly critical, according to sportlogic.com, the advanced metrics back us up. St. Louis had the higher shot quality, more high danger chances, more turnover chances, won 2/3 of the puck battles, 2/3, and killed all 4 Kraken power plays, including almost 2 full minutes of Kraken 6-on-4 in the final 2 minutes after Philip Grubauer was pulled for a 6th attacker. Part of what killed the Kraken, there are two offensive zone face-off losses were big-time time wasters since the Blues could legally ice the puck. Oh, and that St. Louis penalty kill, it's 4th worst in the NHL, under 74%. Seattle, though, doesn't have the elite scoring to make up for less than total team effort, which they didn't get. In 4 of their 5 post-Olympic games, Zaiem, Seattle has scored 2 or fewer goals, which is why GM Jason Botterill has been beating the bushes for a goal scorer before Friday's trade deadline. And I'll finish with this point to reinforce what you already mentioned. The worst thing of all for me, this negates perhaps the Kraken's best effort of the season. 1 game earlier, 2 nights before, a stirring 2-1 victory over the best team in the Eastern Conference, the Carolina Hurricanes. Where was that intensity? Where was that effort that the Kraken team showed on Monday? It was largely AWOL on Wednesday, at least until it was too late.
Blues have Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou, who are the 2 big name scorers that the Kraken have been reportedly linked to. One thing to note is that they have no trade clauses, and we have had a couple of situations, one involving a Blue with Colton Parayko, where it was reported that a player was traded, and then the player was like, hey, I'm not waiving my no trade clause. So I don't think that either of them end up in Seattle this trade deadline, would be my guess. But just be on alert, Kraken fans. If it happens, you see a report and you're like, yep, whoever, Shane Wright, whatever, the compensation, and yeah, they're bringing in Jordan Kyrou or Robert Thomas, and the scoring woes have been addressed. It may not happen because Seattle is not currently perceived as a terribly desirable destination by players, something that we'll get into in a future episode because it's something I want to talk about at length.
And here you go talking up the rain.
I know, right? So, come here in the summer, free agents. Come here in the summer. Check out Seattle. Oh man, it's great. Yeah, just bring in your visits in July. Stay a couple weeks. Oh man, it didn't rain at all. It's so sunny and it's 75 degrees. Wow, this must be how it's like all year round. Coming up next, we have the part 2 of our really fantastic interview with Geoff Baker. He's a no BS kind of guy, as we alluded to, and that's my favorite thing about him. This was really a fantastic interview, and I'm really excited to share the rest of it with all of you. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open when the pressure's on and you need the right hire. This is a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for with skills, experience, and location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. You've done rooftops and you've chased every happy hour, but how about one that's literally above it all? After 4 p.m., the Space Needles Pint and a Pie takes happy hour sky high, and just for $35 per person, you get entry, your choice of a sweet or savory tip-top pie, and a pint of beer, wine, or a non-alcoholic drink. Whether you're pre-gaming for the Kraken, warming up for Climate Pledge, or just here for the views, this is your night on another level. Pint and a Pie. Limited time offer, 21 plus only, minimum to purchase. Tickets at spaceneedle.com. Join the Everydayer Club for ad-free audio, access to our group chat on Discord, and more. Use code DEADLINE ahead of the trade deadline for 1 month free. Join now at lockedonpodcast.com/everydayer or click the link in the show notes.
Let's also move on to the fact that you, Geoff, are the creator of my favorite catchphrase. Sooner or later, everyone gets wet.
You read my book.
That is a line from Geoff's 2022 book, Rising from the Deep, the Seattle Kraken, a tenacious push for expansion and the Emerald City's sports revival. One of the reasons this is a great read, even though the title's too long, is because it's really 3 books in one. It's a fascinating Seattle history lesson, an inside look at big business, and then, oh yeah, a sports book. What were your thoughts behind that mix?
I thought it was an interesting way to get into the topic. I was very fortunate to have had a lot of experience in my career as an investigative reporter on both the news side and the sports side, and so it gave me a lot of perspective. And it showed me, some of the things that people are interested in more so than not. And the one thing I've learned though is when you do investigative reporting, the writing can be really dry if you don't work on it. And the last thing I wanted to do was write a book that's going to go on and on and on and bore the heck out of people. And so, early on, I decided, okay, I got to use a bit of a humorous bent to this whole thing, because again, as I told you, it's not life and death. And it seemed that way with the arena struggles we had in Seattle for many, many years, and the political struggles when it came to getting the arena built, getting the hockey team here. It seemed like people were treating it like life and death at one point, but it really never was. And when you look back at the whole thing now and just how incensed people got and how crazy they got about, everything to do with the battle between Key Arena and Soto Arena and the Chris Hansen group and the Tim Leiweke group and this, that, and the other thing. You look back at it now and it's almost comical to think of how seriously people took this thing. You try to explain it to them in plain English, and they say, really? People got that worked up over an arena? But they did. And, some of it had to do with the Sonics coming back. And, there were people that believed they were going to come back imminently within 6 months to a year. I never believed that. And I've been around long enough to know that that hardly ever happens when it comes to relocating sports teams. 20 years is usually a good gauge from when a team leaves to when a team comes back, with a few obvious exceptions like the Cleveland Browns. But, all fairness, the Sonics, they weren't the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland Browns were a storybook NFL franchise going back, forever. Jim Brown, all that kind of stuff. We can go on and on. the Sonics won, one world title, very important here in Seattle, but they're not the same. They're not going to put a team back in 3 years in Seattle the way people were thinking was going to happen here. And so here we are now. We're 17 years in. People get upset. People get a little antsy about that, and that was driving a lot of what was going on. So I tried to keep the book as insightful and humorous as possible. Plus, I wanted to explain where people were coming from. What I just told you about the Sonics, I wanted to explain why people were getting all riled up
Yeah.
about this, why it meant so much to them. Because somebody living, let's say, on the East Coast in New York might say, Sonics, Seattle, like, who cares? And
Well,
so I'm
they
trying
did.
to I'm trying to explain to them kind of the feelings, the psychology that went on here in the city. And it was a fun exercise because I still don't consider myself a Seattleite. I've been here 20 years now. And I've heard sports fans over the years say, oh, that guy's just an outsider from Toronto, or the people that actually knew how to use Google would say, no, he's from Montreal, but same difference. And um,
You
uh,
carpetbagger.
yeah, exactly. And that's, I did feel like a carpetbagger for many years because people were telling me that I was a carpetbagger. But so it was fun to do this book and try to do it from the perspective of a native Seattleite and really try to capture what they feel, but also have the humor of an outsider. Like when I describe the driving here in Seattle, it's not coming from the perspective of a native Seattleite. I can tell you that. It's coming from the perspective of an outsider with limited patience for people who don't work hard in life and don't want to put in the effort, and B, people who drive at 20 miles an hour in the left lane.
The Seattle wedge.
We won't even get into that.
Okay,
It's
now I
yeah.
do want to get into the Leiweke brothers and the OVG construction firm. They did what no one thought was possible, privately financing the renovation of Key Arena. And the key word, no pun intended, is privately. That's why we have the Kraken, the Torrent, a showplace for the Storm, and one day soon, we hope, the Sonics once again. How did that happen? You only have 2 hours to answer.
Yeah, no, I mean, in short, Tim Leiweke is what happened. That deal doesn't happen without Tim Leiweke. He was a force of nature, and I think the book captures that. I call that book sometimes unofficially. I say it's the unofficial biography of Tim Leiweke because the book does have a lot of Tim Leiweke in it. And there's a reason. He came to Seattle. Seattle hadn't seen anything like him before, and where everybody, the naysayers, came out right away and saying, "Oh, you can't do this. You can't renovate Key Arena. You'll never get past the Seattle process. You'll never get past this, that, and the other." He just kind of laughed, shrugged his shoulders and went and got it done. And that's what the city needed at the time. They needed, I think, somebody from the outside to come in and show them how to get things done. Process is good. I like process, but process is good when something works.
Yeah.
If you're going to have a process, whether it's in a city, a company, whatever, you got to have process. You got to have your rituals, your routines to get you through the actual, functions of things. But if the end result is something that doesn't work, then your process is useless. All your process is doing is ingraining poor, either corporate culture or private culture or whatever into your daily existence.
And that's
So I
another
think,
thing about Seattle, isn't it? That it's said that this city loves process to death.
yeah, well, if you love process, that's great. But if things aren't working in the city, and in that case, the arena situation wasn't working, you got to change the process. And and I'll stick to that, going forward in my daily life. I like process. I recognize why it's important. It's not important when it's handcuffing you and when it's making you less flexible. And Leiweke came in and he said, the heck with your process. And he got things done behind the scenes, but he got things done in a straightforward way. He's kind of like Jacob Melanson out on the ice. He's always plowing forward, plowing into somebody, plowing through somebody, getting towards the opposing net with the puck. He doesn't stop. He's not going backwards very often. And that for me was Tim Leiweke. He didn't go backwards very often. And, thankfully for him, he had his brother as well, Todd Leiweke, who came in after the whole hurricane. Tim Leiweke came in and left Seattle, in the aftermath of his storm. Like he always does. He had Todd to come in and smooth things over with people on the back end just to make sure there weren't any bridges burned or anything like that. I think they make a good 1-2 punch, those brothers. And honestly, without Tim, it doesn't get done. And let's not forget, Tim got that arena finished on schedule, which You know, I look now at some of the photos that they had 3 months before they opened against the Vancouver Canucks in 2021, and I would have been lying awake, like tossing and turning in bed every night. I saw Tim the night the Kraken opened their preseason in Spokane. He came up, tapped me on the shoulder in the press box a couple hours before the game. It was a big game, you know, see the Kraken in uniform for the first time. And I looked at him and he looked like he hadn't slept in weeks and weeks. And he just said it's just been a process getting this. Speaking of process, just been a process getting this arena done. And I felt sorry for the guy because I'm just trying to think, like, he's got his whole family riding on him. I mean, his daughter's a bigwig in OVG, Francesca, and yeah, you know, like, everybody's future is tied to this. He's got people, you know, invested in this. He's got the arena. He's got the NHL, you know, counting on him to open this thing. And you're looking at this. I've had my house rebuilt, and I'll tell you, that was a nightmare that kept me up awake for many a month. And I could just imagine doing it like a thousandfold with an arena. And so, you know, he has my my respect for what he did, and he did it in Toronto too. You look at what he did at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. He went in there and accomplished more in 2 years, 2.5 years, than that organization had probably accomplished in its history before he got there. I mean, he had the Leafs on the verge of contention. You know, they didn't do anything with it, but that's, you know, that's not his fault. He can't go on the ice, but he got the Maple Leafs back again. He turned Toronto FC into a powerhouse soccer team. The Raptors ended up winning an NBA title with his handpicked president and general manager. So I mean, like, he accomplished very much inside a very corporately rigid organization. So you know, I don't think the Kraken are structured nearly as corporately as what you'd see in Toronto from my experience. And so I think there's probably a reason behind that. And yeah, I think he just gets stuff done. And sometimes, you know what, you gotta say, you know, the heck with your process. Let's just get something done. And he did. I like people that do that. I like the people that transform things. And so he did. I mean, you walk through LA Live in downtown LA. He built LA Live. I said that to somebody on our last trip. You know, the guy you met the other day, Tim Leiweke, he built this entire area that you're in. And so not many people can say that. So now, now I'm hoping, I'm angling for a raise from my company after everything I just said about.
Coming up next, we have the final part of our interview with Geoff Baker, where he talks about the Sonics, something we've talked about on this show, and the pressure that it puts on the Kraken with their imminent return. Cold days, packed schedules, and big goals. That's winter. And when there's not a lot of time to cook, eating well can feel like another thing on the to-do list, and that's where Factor comes in. Factor makes healthy eating easy with fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs so you can eat well without the planning, prepping, or cooking. Factor meals are always fresh, never frozen, and ready in about 2 minutes with no refined sugars, no artificial sweeteners, and no refined seed oils. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50off and use code LockedOnNHL50off to get 50% off and free breakfast for a year. Eat like a pro this month with Factor. New subscribers only, varies by plan. One free breakfast item per box for 1 year while subscription is active.
I work so hard, all the work is done. You see, that's the difference.
Ooh.
Yeah. No, not even close.
We have done a lot of speculation on the media side about the return of the Sonics and how it may affect what the Kraken do. Does the potential return of the Sonics affect what's happening on the Kraken side, or are these two essentially completely independent projects, speaking more on the business side, but also maybe on the personal side, is their influences there? Should the Sonics return, because they would share an arena and presumably an ownership group, so it's a little different than competing with like the Mariners or the Seahawks for attention, especially as a winter sport.
No, I mean, that's a good point that you made. We're not going to be competing, you know, corporate wise with them like we would with a separate entity. But I do think, yeah, it's a challenge for us. It sets the bar higher for us as an organization, where we don't have, you know, infinity to get our act together on and off the ice, you know. And I think you're starting to see a real serious, I mean, not that it wasn't serious before, but I mean, people know that this is coming and they hope it's coming. and there's a sense that it will come. And, we have to be ready for it. We don't have the urgency has to be there to try to get better. And we're trying. I mean, you see the team in a playoff spot right now. Are the prognosticators going to pick up us as a cup contender next season or this season? No. But who cares? We're trying to get to the playoffs, so we'll worry about it once we do. There's other things that we're trying to do, inside the organization to make ourselves better, to kind of amalgamate everything that we've built up for the first 4.5 years to get it to function effortlessly. And I was joking 2 minutes ago about my work's done. Our work's never done. And if anything, anybody who's successful at in any line of work, any walk of life knows this. You can't rest on your laurels. You can't go to sleep. You're never happy. You're never satisfied. And that's just the curse of being good at what you do. You've always got that angst to try to do better. And I think, as an organization, we're getting to that point where we need to be, where we're going to not be satisfied with just making the playoffs. We're going to always shoot for more than that, but we'll take the playoffs for now. But I mean, I'm trying to extend that beyond the on ice thing. I mean, the off ice stuff is all I can control. So I want our division, our editorial division, be producing, first rate quality newspaper stuff that would win newspaper awards. That would win an APSE or we don't win Pulitzer Prizes in sports, but whatever the top award's going to be, I want us to do that. I want us to keep doing it until we're doing it every single day. So you're never going to be finished. That's an impossible goal to attain, but you constantly want to get better. And I think we've gotten better at a lot of what we're doing this year, and I know a lot of other departments are trying to do the same thing, trying to up the notch, up the bar a little bit. And the collaboration that we're doing between departments has gotten better over the 1.5 years that I've been here. And so it's a constantly evolving thing. And you're never going to be finished. There's never going to be a day where we sit back and say, all right, let's go. Maybe if we win a Stanley Cup, we'll parade around with it for a day. But then, as that's when it only gets harder, because then the fans start complaining 2 minutes later because you might have to let somebody go in free agency because you can't afford them anymore because they're a champion and everybody wants them. That's just a good way to go about life. But you don't get into the sports world because you want to lie back and have an easy Sunday. It's never like that. As you guys know, it's a 7-day-a-week job. And so that's how I'm trying not to throw out every cliche in the book here, but that's really how I look at it with the Sonics. It's forcing us to be better and get better. Yes, it doesn't mean we were bad before, but it means we have to get better. And it's a reminder that we have to constantly get better so that, we can hold our own when the Sonics do come into this market.
Geoff, let's finish, if you would, telling the story of Roman Vashchuk, because I think sometimes little stories and those feature storytelling bits illuminate so much about the big picture of an organization. Roman Vashchuk and his story says a lot about the Kraken franchise, even though Roman's not a hockey player.
No, he was an opera. I think it's called an opera singer. He was a tenor, I think is the word. And he was touring here in the United States. And when the war broke out in the Ukraine, where he's from, and his family was back there in Ukraine, and so he was trapped here because he couldn't travel over there, and his family was trapped there, and they had to flee to a refugee camp, and I think it was Poland. And so he was back here, keeping in touch with them on a daily basis. And and the Kraken invited him in to sing the Ukrainian national anthem. This is right at the outbreak of the war. I think it was in March of 2022, Kraken's first season. They were playing the Nashville Predators that night. So Todd Leiweke comes into the media room, taps me on the shoulder, and he says, "Here, follow me." And he comes and he introduces me to him in a back room, and we sit there talking, and he's showing us photos of what had happened to his hometown in the Ukraine, and it was just really it was really moving at the time. And then they gave him the tour, brought him to the bench and everything, but then he went out and he sang the anthem, and it was really a haunting time. And he stayed here, he stayed behind, and long story short, the Kraken helped him a little bit, and he ended up getting a visa to stay here and to bring his family over from the refugee camp. And so they're all reunited now and living in the United States. And he was in the Seattle area. I'm not sure he still is. We're on Facebook. He actually liked one of my stories not too long ago. And I'm not sure which one it was, but I met him again. He came back a second time. He was living in the area at the time. So I just haven't kept up. I don't want to say he's still living here if he moved like to Nebraska last week or something, but that's where they were living, and they're still waiting for the war to end over there as everybody else is.
Well,
But that's what I try to tell you, you know, like
yeah.
Sports is not about life and death. It really
Yeah.
isn't. Life and death is life and death, what you're seeing in that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, the Kraken, it was a small gesture, but I think it really helped him at the time to come out and sing the anthem. He told me it was very cathartic for him to do that, to do what he could to help Ukraine. And so, like, when you see the Kraken do stuff like that, it's very important. That happened, I think it was on Kraken Day. It's probably the very first Kraken Day
Yes.
on March 2nd. So it was, it was 4
Mm.
years ago, 4 years ago yesterday, now that I'm thinking about it. And so happy Kraken Day, everybody. But that's,
Well,
for
they
me,
picked March 2nd because it's 3-2, and there was a
that's what it is.
32nd team.
Exactly. And now we celebrate it with a bar and grill, 32 bar and grill. Come on in, lots of good specials every lunch hour. Ken Moriarty will set you up. But no, that, you know, the organization that for me, that's what it was about. It's tried to get little things right in the community at large, not just, you know, with wars and Roman Vashchuk, with other stuff it does in the communities. Everybody has their charities when you're in sports. The Kraken, I think, go above and beyond with how they've tried to implement solutions and tried to directly help people out. And that's a big part of the organization. And it's always been about that. It's been more about the valor of the mission than the mission itself. Yeah, they want to win championships. We're a professional sports team. We want to make money. That's what we do. You know, smack us around if you want. But, you know, we do try to do something with that in addition to, I think you'll talk to a lot of employees in our office. They'll tell you how grateful they are for some of what the organization does for them internally, some of what they do in terms of diversity, in terms of inclusivity within the organization that you won't find in a lot of companies. And you know, we might not be the best at it on the planet, but we are trying to do something beyond making money and beyond winning games. And so the trick is to do all of that stuff together, and then that's when you got the perfect organization. And so we're working on the winning championships part, and hopefully that comes soon.
Hell, Geoff, your club uses reclaimed rainwater to flood the ice. So I like, and Zaiem likes very much, that the Kraken are good corporate citizens as well as running a hockey team. And we also like Geoff Baker because, hey, anybody can make a hockey game or a murder investigation sound interesting. Geoff can give you chills recounting a city council vote. So read his book, Rising from the Deep, and you'll know exactly what I mean. Many thanks, Geoff, and we hope that you'll make a return visit with us.
Yeah, anytime you'll have me. Like I said, I'm not doing much, so just give me a call.
Neither are we.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Geoff.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Kraken. We will be back tomorrow. We're probably going to post a later episode because we are going to wait for the trade deadline to conclude, and then Jason Botterill will do his availability. So it'll be a little bit later. The trade deadline is at noon Pacific on Friday, but make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On Kraken so you do get all the latest episodes. You can find us at Davy Jones LR on all social media platforms, or DavyJonesLockerRoom.com, where we do print coverage of the Seattle Torrent and the Seattle Kraken. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Kraken ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure this is one of your 2 daily listens. For Davy Jones Locker Room, I'm Zaiem Begg.
And I'm Glenn Dreyfuss.
And we will see you tomorrow on Trade Deadline Day.